And welcome again to Bedtime Stories with CrispySkates. Take 3, technically. Yeah, that's live streaming, I guess. But, all in all, good shop refill. That's another story. But we are reading The Wind in the Willows with CrispySkates. And by Kenneth Graham. And we're going to pick up where we left off last night. I'm sorry it's late. Here we go. The rat put out a neat little brown paw, gripped Toad firmly by the scuff of the neck, and gave a great hoist, a pull, and the waterlogged Toad came up slowly but surely. Over the edge of the hole till the last he stood safe and sound in the hall, streaked with mud and weed, to be sure, and with the water streaming off of him, but the happy and high-spirited as of old. Now he found himself once more at the house of a friend, and dodgings of evasions were over, and he could lay aside disguise that was unworthy of his position and wanted such a lot of living up to. "Oh, Ratty," he cried, "I must have been through such times since I saw you last. You can't think. Such trials, such sufferings, and all shall be nobly borne. Then such escapes, such disguises and subterfuges, and all so cleverly planned and carried out. I've been in prison, got out of it, of course, been thrown into a canal, swam ashore, stole a horse, sold him for a large sum of money, humbugged everybody, made 'em do all exactly what I wanted. Oh, I am a smart Toad. And make no mistake. What do you think of my last exploit was? Just hold on and I'll tell you." "Toad," the water rat cried gravely and firmly, "you go off upstairs at once and take off that old cotton rag that looks as if it might formerly have belonged to some washerwoman, and clean yourself thoroughly, and put on some of my dry clothes. Try come down looking like a gentleman, if you can. For more shabby, begattered, disreputable-looking object than you are, I never set eyes on in my whole entire life. Now, stop swaggering and arguing and be off. I shall have something to say to you later." The Toad was at first inclined to stop and do some talking back at him. He had been enough of being ordered about, and he was in prison, and here he was, the thing being begun all over again, apparently, and by rat too. However, he caught sight of himself in the looking-glass and oversought the same, and with a rusty black bonnet perched rakishly over one eye, he changed his mind and went quickly and humbly upstairs to Rat's dressing room. There he had a thorough wash and brush, and changed his clothes, and stood for a long time before the glass, completing himself with pride and pleasure, and thinking what utter idiots all the people must have been to have ever mistaken him for one moment for a washerwoman. By the time he came down from luncheon again, was on the table, a very glad Toad he was to see it, for he had been through some trying experiences, and had taken much exercise since the excellent breakfast provided him with by the gypsy. While they ate, Toad told Rat of all of his adventures, dwelling chiefly on his own cleverness, and presence of mind in emergencies, and cunning in places, and rather making out that he had been having a gay and highly colored experience. But the more he talked, boasted, and the more gravely and silent that the rat became. When at last the toad talked himself into stand, there was silence for a while, and then the rat said, "Now, Toady, I don't want to give you pain after all you've been through already, but seriously, you don't see what an awful ass you've been making of yourself. On your own admission, you have been handcuffed, imprisoned, starved, chased, terrified out of your life, insulted, jeered at, and ignoramously flung into the water. By a woman, too. There's an amusement in that. Where does the fun come in? And all you must needs to go and steal a motor car. You know that you've never had anything but trouble from motor cars from the moment that you first set your eyes on one. But if you will be mixed up with them, as you generally are, 5 minutes after you've started, why steal them? Be a cripple if you think of it exciting, and be bankrupt of it being challenging if you've set your mind on it. But why choose to be a convict when you are going to be sensible and think of your friends and try to be a credit to them? Do you suppose it's any pleasure to me, for instance, to hear animals saying, as I go about, that I am the chap that keeps company with gold birds? Now, it was a very comforting point to Toad's character that he was a thoroughly good-hearted animal, and never minded being jawed by those who were his real friends, and even the most upon a thing, he was able to see the other side of the question. So, although while the rat was talking seriously, he kept saying to himself mutinously, "But it was fun, through awful fun," and making strange suppressed noises inside him, pop, 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 and the other sounds resembling stifled sorts of the opening of soda water bottles. Yet when the rat had quite finished, he heaved a deep sigh and said, very nicely and humbly, quite ratty, "Now, sound you always are. Yes, I've been a conceited old ass. I can quite see that. But now I'm going to be a good toad, and I'm not to do it anymore. As for motor cars, I've not been all so keen about them since my last ducking in the river of yours. The fact is, while I was hanging on the edge of your hole and getting my breath, I had an idea, and we won't talk any more about it now. We'll have our coffee and a smoke and quite chat about it now. And then I'm going to stroll quietly down to Toad Hall and get into clothes of my own and set things going again on the old lines. I've had enough of adventures. I shall lead a quiet, steady, respectful life, pottering about my property and improving it, and doing a little landscaping and gardening at times. There will always be a little bit of dinner for my friends when they come to see me, and I shall have a pony chase to jog about in the country, just as I used to in the good old days, before I got restless and wanted to do things. Stroll quietly to Toad Hall, cried the rat, greatly excited. What are you talking about? Do you mean to say you haven't heard? Heard what? Said Toad, turning rather pale. Go on, Ratty. Quick, don't spare me. What haven't I heard? Do you mean to tell me, shouted the rat, thumping with a little fist on the table, that you've heard nothing about the Stoats and the Weasels? What? The Wild Wooders? Cried Toad, trembling in every limb. No, not a word. What have they been doing? And how have they been and taken Toad Hall? Continued the rat. Toad leaned his elbows on the table and his chin on his paws, and a large tear welled up in his eyes, overflowed and splashed on the table. Plop, plop, plop. Go on, Ratty, he murmured presently. Tell me all. The worst is over. I am an animal again. I can hear it. When you got into that trouble of yours, said the rat, slowly and impressively. I mean, when you disappeared from society of a time over the misunderstanding about a machine, you know. The toad merely nodded. Well, it was a good deal talked about down here, naturally, continued the rat. Not only along the riverside, but even in the wildwood. Animals took sides, as always happens. The river bankers stuck up for you and said you had been infamously treated, and there was no justice to be had in the land nowadays. But the wildwood animals said hard things and served you right, and it was time this sort of thing was stopped. And they got very cocky and went about saying you were done for this time. You would never come back again. Never, never, never. Toad nodded once more, keeping silence. That's sort of little beasts they are, the rat went on. But the mole and the badger, they stuck out through thick and thin, that you would come back again soon somehow. They didn't know exactly how, but somehow. Toad began to sit up in his chair again and smirk a little. They argued from history, continued the rat. They said that no criminal laws had ever been known to prevail against cheek and plausibility such as yours, combined with the power of a long purse. So they arranged to move their things into your Toad Hall and sleep there and keep it aired and have it all ready for you when you tunneled up. They didn't guess what was going to happen, of course. Still, they had their suspicions of the wildwood animals. Now I come to the most painful and tragic part of my story. One dark night, it was very dark night, and the blowing hard wind too, and the rain simply cats and dogs, and a band of weasels armed to the teeth crept silently out of the carriage drive into the front entrance. Simultaneously, a body of desperate ferrets advancing through the kitchen garden possessed themselves of the backyard and offices, while a company of skirmishing stoats, who also at nothing occupied at the conservatory and the billiard room, and held the French windows opening to the lawn. The mole and the badger were sitting by the fire in smoking room, telling stories and suspecting nothing, for it was a night for any animals to be out, when those bloodthirsty villains broke down the doors and rushed upon from every side. They made the best fight that they could, but what was the good? They were unarmed and taken by surprise. And what can two animals do against hundreds? They took a beat them severely with sticks, those two poor faithful creatures, and turned them out into the cold and wet, with many insulting, uncalled for remarks. Here the unfeeling toad broke into a snicker, and then pulled himself together and tried to look particularly solemn. And the wild wooders have been living in Toad Hall ever since, continued the rat, and going on simply anyhow, lying in a bed half the day and breakfast at all hours. And the place in such a mess, I'm told. It is not fit to be seen. Eating your grub and drinking your drink and making bad jokes about you, singing vulgar songs about prisons and magistrates and policemen, horrid personal songs with no humor in them. And they're telling the tradespeople and everybody that they've come to stay for good. Oh, have they, said the toad, getting up, seizing a stick. I'll jolly soon see about that. It's no good, Toad, called the rat after him. You'd better come back and sit down. You'll only get into trouble. But Toad was off, and there was nothing holding him back. He marched rapidly down the road, his stick over his shoulder, fumbling and muttering to himself his anger till he got near front gate, when suddenly there popped up from behind the palings a long yellow ferret with a gun. Who comes there? Said the ferret sharply. Stuff and nonsense, said the toad angrily. What do you mean by talking like that to me? Come out of there at once, or I'll... The ferret said never a word, but he brought up his gun to his shoulder. Toad prudently dropped the flap to the road, and bang! A bullet whizzed over his head. The startled toad scrambled to his feet and scampered off down the road as hard as he could, and ran as hard as he could, and the ferret laughing, and the other horrid thin little laughs, taking it up and carrying out on the sound. All right, you guys, we're going to end it right there. I'm falling asleep. My little guy's already asleep in my bed. So I hope you guys have a wonderful wonderful evening and sweet dreams. And we're going to keep moving, you guys, and keep strong and keep it crispy. And just remember, when we're finished with this book, we'll be moving to our other channel, which is CrispySkates Bedtime Stories. Hello, George. How are you? Oh, wait. Do I know this, George? Anyway. Oh, I do. I believe George is the content creator as well. And he's pretty cool. I actually know him. I just want to say I hope you're all, thank you for being here. I hope you're all doing fantastic. And stay strong. The Force is strong. We're Star Wars fans. Keep it crispy until tomorrow night. Love you guys so much. Good night.